Greetings to all. Thank you and welcome for joining us on a little conversation on the Rohingya issue. Today, we are going to be discussing Asia's most acute refugee problem. More than 1 million people from Myanmar are still being given refuge in Bangladesh. However, the prospects of them being able to return peacefully to their country seems remote following the coup in Myanmar this February in which the military had seized power. We are joined by Duncan Bartlett, Indo-Pacific editor of the Koothneeti, who has been following the situation closely. So, Mr. Bartlett, what do you know or what can you explain about the situation of the Rohingyas now?
Well, the Rohingyas are part of a Muslim community who came into Bangladesh in 2017, having been in conflict with the military in Myanmar. What seems to happen is that some of the Rohingyas had challenged the soldiers, and then the soldiers reacted by attacking Rohingya villages. In fact, the United Nations described this as a textbook example of ethnic cleansing. So many people fled across the border. About 1 million of them ended up in Bangladesh. They've been given accommodation in an area called Cox's Bazar. In fact, it's the world's biggest refugee camp. But gradually, the Bangladesh government is trying to move the Rohingyas into new homes on an island called Basan Char. About 20,000 have relocated so far, and the plan is that many more should follow.
What do you think is the goal of the Bangladesh government in addressing the situation of the Rohingyas?
Well, the Bangladesh government has two quite clear roles. First of all, to provide humanitarian support and some form of accommodation to the Rohingya refugees. And it's been doing that for a number of years. But it is now particularly emphasizing that this is only a temporary solution. It does not want the refugees to be stuck there for the rest of their lives, or worse still, for generations. So it says that what we need is a humanitarian way of enabling these Rohingyas to return to their homeland, to Myanmar, and in particular to Rakhine State, where most of them come from. So a big international effort is underway, led by the Bangladeshis, to try to enable the Rohingyas to return home. That's not going to happen immediately, so the process is to try to find them some sort of accommodation and a temporary solution, but it may be a temporary solution that lasts several years.
So you mentioned that it's an international issue. So what is India's role in this?
Well, the Indian Foreign Minister, Mr. Jaishankar, has promised to give Bangladesh all the support he can in helping the refugees to return to Myanmar. What's been happening is that some of the refugees have been leaving the camps in Bangladesh, coming out of Cox's Bazar and coming into India. The position of the Indian authorities as we speak is that those people are illegal immigrants and they are being returned forcibly to Bangladesh. That's a controversial issue. It's not winning approval from the United Nations. But the Indian government says that the Rohingya refugees present a security threat to India and to the region.
What claims can you make out of the fact that the refugees are being represented as a threat to international security?
Well, I can see that some of the refugees have been arrested for illegal activity on suspicion of drug smuggling and things like that. By no means all, but a few have been. The other security issue is one related to the environment, because where the refugees are staying at the moment in Cox's Bazar is a very sensitive area. They've been chopping down trees to create fuel for their fires, for cooking and so on. But the area is prone to floods. The other thing is that Bangladesh is already a very crowded country, even more highly populated than India, and it's further down the development scale than India. So there's an economic burden on Bangladesh for looking after the refugees, which it can ill afford.
What can other countries influence for the outcomes of these refugees?
Well, some countries, including the United States, have been quite generous in providing money to support the United Nations in running the refugee camps. And indeed, the Biden administration has said that it will probably accept some Rohingya refugees into the United States. I say some, I mean, it's likely to be a few dozen rather than a million who are currently in Bangladesh. The Chinese are also saying that they want to help with the international negotiations to try to help the Rohingya to return home. So there's a big diplomatic effort at the moment, supported by a number of nations, including China, India, and the US.
Lastly, do you think there is a hope for these Rohingyas to be able to get back to their country, that which is Myanmar?
I think it will be very difficult for these Rohingya to be able to return to Myanmar while the current military government is in place. And the military general Min Aung Hlaing recently gave a speech in which he said there's unlikely to be multi-party elections for a number of years. Indeed, he's declared himself as prime minister. There have been a lot of calls by politicians and humanitarian organizations from other countries calling for a restoration of democracy in Myanmar. There's no sign of that happening in the immediate future. There is a government in exile which has said that it would welcome back the refugees, but by definition, it's not actually a government that holds any power. So there would have to be a political change in Myanmar, really, to create a more stable environment in which the Rohingyas would feel safe to return. That's not happening at the moment, so I'm afraid we're in something of a diplomatic limbo.
Thank you, Mr. Bartlett. That was Mr. Duncan Bartlett, Indo-Pacific editor of the Koothneeti. And you can get to know more about the Rohingya issues and other range of diplomatic events on our website, the Koothneeti.